a smartphone with wheels. So we thought it would be good to also have the point of view of somebody from the telecommunication industry. The world has really changed. I remember last century when the phone came into cars for the first time, Radiocom 2000, I don't know if you remember those, but for the first time, telecommunication was moving inside the car. Today, the car, as Christophe was saying, is becoming a software platform, a telecommunication platform. But how would you say maybe the relationship between the telcos and the car manufacturers have changed, or the perception of each other have changed in the last few years?
Well, I think we've been talking about smartphones, wheels, connected, cars becoming connected devices and smartphones on wheels for quite some time. I think what's changing is that it's really becoming true. And it's true that the way we see it is, first of all, the expectations from consumers has changed a lot. And we see the consumptions in cars on mobility of podcasts, entertainment, working, of course, passengers. But this is something that's now unacceptable for consumers if they don't have good connectivity in their car. Also because of course, we are talking about entertainment, but because indeed cars embark more and more software, those softwares have to be updated. So cars have to be connected. And we've been using GPSs for quite some time for localization. And now all cars have embedded not only entertainment system, but all those services that are, and I think it's the CEO, was it Valeo or BMW, was saying this is something that customers are ready to pay for because it's part of, maybe they pay very expensive smartphones, but they're ready to pay for this entertainment part of cars. So it's really becoming true. But at the same time, what has changed as well is that our infrastructures have also matured. And it's true that 10 years ago, when we were talking for the first time, maybe in Europe, but also in Asia, about cars being smartphones on wheels, the infrastructures at the time, we were just deploying 4G. Now we have 5G, complementing, of course, all type of technology. So the experience itself is much more reliable. And of course, we have also all the cybersecurity and security issues that come with it.
Building this connectivity network for the car, has it been difficult? Is it a challenge, or it's more or less putting more antennas and it's not that difficult to make sure that your car is connected?
So the cars are connected through satellite, GPS, that's been for a long time. The 5G networks we use are exactly the same, whether we use it for connected objects, for smartphones, or for cars, they are the same. What is new now with 5G is that we can dedicate spectrum and we can have critical services or critical connectivity in one part of the spectrum. And by the way, this is something that networks are just embedding. The technology was ready, but we are now deploying it massively in Europe. The Chinese players have been deploying it, the US telecom operators as well. So the infrastructure, the billions of, we invest every year 6.5 billion euro of infrastructure, 5G, fiber in Europe and Africa. This is exactly the same infrastructure that the car industry will benefit from. So there's not extra investment. What we have to do, of course, is for the car industry, I think the audience knows that. Every cent matters. So leveraging the infrastructure that have been deployed for all consumers and workers is, of course, a great benefit for the car industry. So we're not thinking of doing something on the side.
We know that you have to invest more and more into fiber because we watch more and more Netflix and at home, but do you also expect that the car being more and more connected will have a huge impact on your networks? Will you have to densify and build a stronger and bigger network because the data that will travel through your networks because of transportation will be huge in the future, or it's a low-intensity data environment?
So in our networks, whether people consume video through the entertainment system of the car connected through 5G or through their smartphones makes no difference. And we have, of course, a lot of data analytics that help us design our networks. Now, more and more, our networks are more flexible, and we can upgrade the capacities of the network depending on where customers travel. And by the way, because we have so many objects connected in our networks, we have also solutions to help car manufacturers, infrastructure managers around where the traffic is. And this is something, I mean, you may remember during COVID, we provided some of our data, and we've been monitoring where the population was moving just after or just before the lockdown. But we are doing the same all the time. And this is true when you think about today EV charging station. Patrick Pouyanné was talking about, I mean, the challenge of investing in infrastructure that will be used for some time and heavily used maybe during the commute time or during the summer holidays, but not used as. This is something that we have the ability to plan thanks to the, I mean, trillions of data that we have in our networks.
But do you see the car industry as an opportunity for an operator like yourself? Is it going to open new market, and maybe you always are looking for new revenues? Will you be able to invent new businesses in which people will be willing to pay for, or it's just that I will be using my smartphone when I'm in my car and it's not going to change your business model?
So as a consumer, the business model will be the same for us as operators, but the car industry, and we have a dedicated team in our Orange business activity working with car manufacturers around the globe. Because what do car manufacturers need? They need to, of course, rely on the connectivity that we can sell, but they want to manage themselves the car connectivity because it's part of the safety system of the car to be able to update software. It's part also of the entertainment proposal. And of course, the customer relationship is very important. So we have solutions that we propose, and we work with European players. We work as well with Asian manufacturers, Chinese also manufacturers, because a car in the end for us is a SIM card in our network. So it's a connected object.
You sell a SIM card.
So we sell a SIM card. Of course, this is software updated. We sell also something that's very important: interoperability. Because remember that networks. I mean, you travel from France to Italy, France to Germany. You change regulation, you change environment from a network connectivity environment. And of course, this is something that, I mean, this is standards, this is something that's working, this is something that, of course, the cars would benefit from. So data analytics for car manufacturers, ability to manage customers through SIM card and connectivity, and of course, cybersecurity. And this is something we've started, by the way, in the Software Republic initiative together with Renault and Thales. We've been investing a lot on cybersecurity. Of course, we bring the know-how, the know-how on the threats, the evolution of the threats, because this is something we see in our networks. And the objective is really to make sure that when we see threats, we can detect it before it touches the car, and we can respond it automatically. This is something we're working on with Thales, bringing the defense know-how, with Renault, of course, bringing the car know-how.
So you talked about Software Republic. Have you already delivering some product, or it's more like engineers working on some products that will be delivered in the future, or is it something that you already have solutions to try to reduce the cyber threats and other services?
No, we already have solutions live for car manufacturers, but on top of that, Software Republic is also a way to make sure that we push and we innovate here in France for the industry.
Okay, we'll come back to Software Republic. On the autonomous driving, to be autonomous, the cars will need to have a perfect connectivity, and they will need to be able to detect all the dangers all the time. But in telecommunications network, there is what we call in French zone blanche. I don't know if it's called white zones in English, but places around the world where it doesn't work. So how can we believe that there will be one day a real autonomous car all around at least France, because you don't offer a 100% coverage for mobile phone?
So of course we know the data, and we know that there are still 20% of the rural roads where you don't have good enough connectivity. That being said, we are barely starting on autonomous driving, and the reality of the needs, there's a lot of technical debates, and even between the US and, I mean, Tesla and the Chinese manufacturers, China is probably the most advanced in terms of autonomous driving. It's not just the connectivity. It's, I mean, Christophe Périllat was here. The computing power that's required, the way you design and you observe your environment. Do you rely on cameras, on LiDAR? And this is something that has, so there's massive impact on computing power. It's a lot of artificial intelligence that's required, so you need the models. But it's true that when we see what's happening in China, it relies on 5G networks. But today, it's still in areas where there's a lot of traffic. So no doubt that we already have 5G networks in those areas. And even if we were thinking of autonomous driving on some specific routes, it's very easy if they're not covered to add so I don't think we need to wait for 100% perfect 5G coverage around the world to start implementing.
So in a sense, you said that maybe autonomous driving will start with a taxi type of services in cities, and that as it gets more efficient and
you go
reliable.
to California or you go to China, you already see on some routes some expert. I mean, it's not really experiments because it's running live and you can get the service.
So it will be a step by step. Then we will have it maybe on highways, and then one day we'll have rural areas.
It will be step by step. It will be. There's also a real question around the cost of autonomous driving, because car manufacturers, of course, have to make an arbitrage because the amount of compute. So unless we drive the cost of compute and AI and systems for autonomous driving down, you wonder at some point whether, I mean, it needs to be affordable to scale. And for the time being, the systems are still quite expensive because the compute power, now the costs are going down pretty fast. But Europe is probably not at the forefront of these revolutions.
In the telecom industry, you move on. There is new technology all the time. I'm pretty sure that after 5G, one day you'll come up with something called 6G. Will this have an impact on the auto industry, or is it just more bandwidth and capacity to manage more data? Or can you imagine that maybe if the telecom network becomes more efficient, then we will be able to imagine new services?
So it's true that we've been used to deploying 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. By the way, we still operate our 2G networks. So the first priority that we set, and this is not just me, Orange, talking, this is the industry at large, everywhere, decommissioning 2G and 3G will be critical, because what's the scarce resource in this environment? Spectrum. There's one thing that that's the scarce resource, spectrum. So how much spectrum do we allocate for satellite connectivity? How much spectrum do we use today for 2G and 3G? This spectrum, we want to use it for 4G and maximum 5G, because that's the most efficient way from an energy standpoint, from a data throughput standpoint, to consume and to provide connectivity. So there's still a lot to do leveraging 5G technology. And we are upgrading, so there's 5G 0.0, 5G 1.1, 1.2. Of course, some people, our teams are working on 6G standards. China is very much pushing for it. I don't think the telecom industry, who's still investing massively on fiber, and by the way, we still need to roll out 5G everywhere. We're far from thinking 6G, and it would be smooth anyway for cars. It would be an upgrade software, so it wouldn't change dramatically the experience.
The car industry more or less used to be simple. You were buying one car, but now Christophe from Valeo was telling us you will add services. You will pay for a subscription. You will pay for new services. And in the telecom industry, you've seen that. It used to be simple. You were selling everything, but now we use your network to consume, and very often you not criticize, but you complain that all that you have been able to create, or that has been created because you're there, you don't share any of this value. Do you think that in the car of the future, it will be more, there is a way for operators and all those who offer services to maybe also grab a little bit of that pie? How do you put yourself in the room?
So I think what's very interesting indeed is that we see software manufacturers, and it's been mentioned this morning, I mean, Google with Android, and of course their cloud infrastructure, but also the Chinese device manufacturers. Of course, they see cars really as a mobile device, which it is. It's a mobile device.
Huawei and Xiaomi are now in the car business.
And so they're working on the continuity of experience. You think, I mean, Xiaomi or Huawei, so that you have your smartphone experience, you enter your car, you have exactly the same experience. Of course, you add all the connectivity for the car, the safety options, etc. So that's really something that they are after. Now, in terms of value, I think we are far I mean, again, on the traffic on our networks, 70% of the traffic at peak hour, it's 5 platforms, and it's mostly video streaming. So it's the YouTube, the Netflix, etc. We are far from seeing that type of traffic coming from connected objects, because if we think about software upgrade on a car, that's very limited in terms of traffic. Now, if we think about an AI world tomorrow, there's a real question around where the compute will be. Will the compute happen in the car? Will the compute happen in the edge of the network or somewhere in the hyperscalers infrastructure? That has massive impact on the traffic that will happen in our network. So it's still early days, but this is something we're absolutely working on within the telco industry, with device manufacturers, and of course with hyperscalers and cloud infrastructure players. The reality today, if we see what's happening indeed with the streaming video industry, we have a model where indeed the players selling you all those platforms, their business model is based on more views, so more traffic for us. But they don't pay for the cost of the traffic in our networks. I think with AI, it's still very early. We want to make sure we won't see the same, where indeed there's a lot of compute in the device. But by the way, Apple has just said with the iPhone 16 that part of the AI compute will be done in their cloud infrastructure. OpenAI, we spend a lot of time with them. They also don't understand the device experience. So this is something on which we will have to work in an open ecosystem to understand. And of course, same will happen for cars, because we do believe, of course, that cars and all type of mobility, if we think about autonomous driving, this will have massive impact and the need for connectivity, but the security threats as well. So it's a huge revolution.
2 last questions. One on satellites. Do satellites also have a role? We know that, for example, for connectivity in airplanes, now you can have Starlink systems to have internet in a plane. But for the car industry, do you think that you will also have to offer satellite services at a reasonable price?
So we absolutely see satellite connectivity as a complementary solution to 5G networks, because because 100% coverage doesn't happen. Now, I mean, if you go underground tunnels, etc., satellite is not going to be a solution. So you still need
a few antennas.
deep indoor type of coverage. So it will be complementary. We already today partner with satellite constellations. You mentioned Starlink, so indeed, and satellite is good for solutions on the move, for airline industry, of course, boats, and it's true that we talked about GPS. I mean, GPS is a satellite, so satellite connectivity is already embedded in the cars. Now, when we think about entertainment, videos, a lot of traffic, the satellite connectivity is still very expensive when we think about broadband, and it's really not good if you have a lot of traffic, people stuck in their cars trying to connect. Satellite connectivity with, I mean, the spectrum. Back to the scarce resource in our industry, it's really the spectrum use.
Last question. You mentioned Software Republic. It's more or less a consortium of many French actors trying to cooperate and work together. Do you think that the French team, in a sense, can compete with maybe the Americans that are so good in manufacturing, but also software, and the Chinese, which have the huge economy of scale? Do we have the know-how and the element to be able to compete with those players? And is it possible to cooperate when you put so many different people around the table?
So I think the reality of today is that everyone has to work with an ecosystem of players who come from very different industry and know-how. Software Republic is a great initiative. Indeed, it's in France. But as Orange, we work with Japanese manufacturers, Chinese manufacturers. Of course, Renault operates globally and has a global supply chain. So none of us are French and restricted to France. And I think that's the benefit. I mean, as telco operators, our value is really, our job is to integrate the best and the latest technology to understand both the devices, the software that sits on the devices, the network technology, the cybersecurity threats. And this is something that, of course, we are a very regulated industry. So we know also how to manage local regulation. And this is something that's very difficult to manage unless you have had local that experience. And so we try to make it smooth for global players by design, car manufacturers, to be able to think supply chain and connectivity across the world. Again, interoperability, this is something that we know how to manage.
Christel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to call now John Bozzella. John has two hats, I would say. He's the president of the equivalence in the US of the Platform Automobile, the lobbying group in charge of all the almost all the manufacturer of cars in the US. It's called the Alliance for Automotive Innovation, but he's also the president of the Global Alliance of Car Association around the world. John, can you join me on stage, and then I will follow up with a few questions.
Good morning. Bonjour. It is a pleasure to be here at the 2024 Paris Automotive Summit. Let me begin by recognizing Antoine Armand, the Minister of Economics, Finance,